Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Abby Ball, Vice President of Market Research here at Marion Square. While we're waiting for everyone to join, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. We will be recording the webinar today, so we can share this later on. All attendees will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording, as well as additional resources that the team has put together. Everyone will be muted for the duration of the webinar, but we encourage you to submit any questions you may have through the Q&A window, as we'll be doing a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenters for today, Harvey Morrison from Marion Square, as well as Mike Schrader and Caitlin Lewis from Carahsoft. Today we'll be discussing why the government is such a great market for emerging technologies, some of the programs and opportunities the government has for emerging technologies, as well as the benefits, strategies, and some best practices for entering the federal space. All right, Harvey, I'll hand it to you to get us started and share more about Marion Square.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Abby, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. What I thought I'd do is start the webinar by giving you just a quick background on Marion Square, sort of who we are, and some of the services we provide, and then I'll turn it over to our partners at Carahsoft, and they can give you just a quick overview on Carahsoft. So just a background, Marion Square, we're an advisory firm that helps organizations seeking to either launch or grow their government business. Marion Square works with companies both large and small who are considering making the investment to pursue business, to pursue government business more specifically, or companies that need to revamp their government business, perhaps due to poor results, or they just have a desire to exponentially grow that government practice. We were founded in 2015. And over the last 8 years, we've successfully worked with over 150 different companies with technologies ranging from cybersecurity and AI to VR and AR types of technologies. We like to say at Marion Square, our mission is fundamentally to enable our clients to build successful government businesses through our detailed market research and analysis, coupled with the development and execution of effective government go-to-market strategies and sales campaigns. We see Marion Square really sitting at that intersection of government sales strategy and execution. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll turn it over to the folks at Carahsoft for a quick background on them.
Awesome. Thanks, Harvey. So I think most of you guys are familiar with Carahsoft, but those who are newer to our relationship, Carahsoft has been supporting the public sector and IT industry for close to 20 years now, with expertise in solutions in cloud, AI, customer experience, and a lot more. We work with our wonderful resellers, system integrators, and consultants to provide industry with leading IT products, services, and training through our hundreds of contract vehicles. And Carahsoft is dedicated to helping our vendors and partners navigate the complexities of selling into the government marketplace. If we can go to the next slide, please. So why the government? Well, the government is a great marketplace. This year alone, there's going to be $123 billion going into IT software and services. There's going to be about $65.8 billion for civilian and $57.9 billion for defense, with a steady year-over-year increase. But the reason why it's a great marketplace for emerging solutions is that the government has never been more open to embracing emerging technology than it is now. And we're seeing this with all of the numerous programs that have been put into place, such as CBERS, OTAs, and the DIU, so that the government can connect with small, innovative companies. So this is a great time to be expanding your technology footprint or breaking into this marketplace. So I'm going to take some time to really dive a little bit deeper into what the government is doing to adopt these emerging and innovative technologies. You can go to the next slide, please. So first, the government has this learn fast mindset right now, where they're not afraid to fail fast and try again until there's a successful result. We're seeing this with the adoption of flexible contracting mechanisms, such as innovation procurement channels like the DIA's Needopedia, and then the innovation hubs such as AFWorks. But there are also incubators for the DoD called software factories. So right now, software factories are only for the DoD, but we're going to see through our research that they're going to start expanding that into the civilian space as well as into state and local. But if you are in the DevSecOps realm, this is going to be a great place for you to start, is with those software factories. Also, the amount of budget going into research and development right now is huge. It's astronomical. Choose whatever adjective you would like. The DoD is investing $28 billion on top of that $123 billion that I just showed you guys in the previous slide into R&D. And of this, CBERs are going to account for about 3%. So it's going to be a big, big marketplace. So I want to kind of spend some time to walk you guys through, hey, how do you become part of these funds, right? There's going to be a couple of ways. One, it's going to be through these innovation hubs in these groups. And Abby, if you can go to the next slide. And two, it's going to be through these innovation offices. There has been a huge influx of growth in strategic innovation offices and personnel. As Abby mentioned before, there's going to be a resource page that it's going to be sent out after the webcast. That's going to have a listing of all these innovation hubs and these strategic offices. But I did want to point out that the adoption of emerging technology isn't just in the federal space, but it's also going to go to state and local. So for example, we can see in California, the governor just hired a new innovation lead for the entire state. So we're going to continue to see this growth in investing more into innovation. And this is just showing us that the opportunity is endless in this marketplace. We can go to the next slide. And then the third way that you guys can get involved is through what we're calling social innovation. So these are areas that the government has explicitly stated that they need help with emerging technology. So first we have workforce development, specifically for cyber, but there's been a widespread of labor shortages that is impacting the IT world really hard right now. The challenges include the aging workforce, outdated recruitment techniques, compensation that's not comparable to private sector, and the government's in need of 40,000 cybersecurity jobs right now because cybersecurity is huge. Innovation is really what is needed to help solve this problem. What are different ways that the government can go about increasing their workforce, not only by recruiting, but also with training. And then also through diversity, equity, inclusion, and the accessibility in the workforce, this also will lead to more innovation. So there was an executive order that came out back in 2021 that is encouraging and mandating that agencies start adopting DEI so that they can become more innovative, especially when it comes to their workforce. There's also green IT. This is how technology can help lower greenhouse gas emissions and climate-related financial risks. So as an example of this, the government is investing more into electric vehicles. So the Department of Homeland Security is piloting an electric vehicle program where they're turning heavy gas emission cars into electric vehicles. And right now there's security assessments going on that need to be conducted to identify, hey, what are the threats, the vulnerabilities, the risks, everything associated with putting electric vehicles into the fleet for their law enforcement efforts. And then there's also been a ton of legislation around climate-related technologies. Hey, how can innovation help with these problems that they're trying to solve for our citizens? And then lastly, there's going to be smart cities. So innovation and emerging technology can help with a large scope of applications that are needed, from mobility to urban planning into all of the waste management. So there's a ton of opportunity, and the government, again, it has never been more open to embracing these technologies. And these are just a few of the examples. So now I'm going to pass it over to Harvey and Mike, and they're going to walk you guys through how do you take this stuff to the market.
Hey, thanks a lot, Caitlin. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so from a go-to-market perspective, we work with clients every day around, hey, what's the best way to approach this? Because I'm sure you all have thought about it and looked at it. If you're thinking about getting into the government space, we don't want to waste 6 months of time and effort only to have it yield nothing for us. So we've got a set of recommendations here to talk about, what works, what doesn't work as you try to get into this space. So Mike, maybe I can walk through these and you can add some comments around them as we go. But,
Sure.
what we have found that really doesn't work is one sort of the spray and pray approach, which is, hey, let's just get a bunch of meetings and everything else will take care of itself. The other thing we find is your reuse of commercial content or commercial practices to go to market typically don't transfer to government. They need to be real specific to government. The other one is not a real big understanding of the ideal opportunity or customer profile for government. And we'll cover some of this in our later section, but really having a good understanding of those things can help identify the right opportunities, ensure you win them. And then no plan for contracting and partnering. That's going to be key as well. The last thing you want to do is have a client go, hey, we really like your stuff. Now, how do we buy it? And you don't really have an answer for that. So we always like to say, hey, the final objective of your government go-to-market is not really a meeting. It's actually winning contracts. And that's what we want to help you focus in on here as we put this plan in front of you.
Yeah, and Harvey, to add into all those fine points, we see a lot of companies and meet with a lot of companies that are just entering the public sector market and are taking a more aimless approach. Maybe they've had some sort of validation in other markets, maybe finance, maybe healthcare, trying to replicate some of those successes and in most cases, one-to-one, apples to apples, those use cases don't necessarily translate and require some translation as far as and let alone some level of understanding of the government customers that you want to go pitch, you want to be in front of, and what their business pains and problems are. So teeing yourself up to have those good meetings, good conversations. There are plenty of people out there in the government that will take meetings and will get educated on technology that's in the market. But you want to set yourself up success with meeting with the right folks that have the right business, pains and are truly qualified for as potential, sales opportunities. Let alone, as Harvey mentioned, the good problem that we all face when a customer is ready to contract or buy. If you haven't mapped out the procurement or transactional landscape from a partnering and contract vehicle perspective, again, you could be putting in lots of work all for going for naught. So recommendation is put some planning and thought up front into when it does come time to solve that good problem of needing to transact.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that leads right into the next slide here. Abby, if you could go ahead to the next one. So one of the first recommendations, or really the first recommendation we always make to clients is do your research. And when I say that, I think you should really spend more time to think about and work in this area than you really think you should. Understand the market, where your technology fits, who has a budget, who's been spending money, and which organizations own these critical contacts or contracts. This is the type of in-depth market research that Marion Square both provides and recommends companies to invest quite a bit of time in as they're developing their go-to-market strategies, as well as deciding where to hire or even deploy their resources. From our experience, this is an area where companies spend pretty much the least amount of time. Instead, they focus on, hey, let's just go out and get the first meeting, or maybe a particular agency contacts them and says, hey, we're interested in your technology. And the company hops in with both feet. And 6 months later, they look up and say, well, this was a complete waste of our time and company resources. The key point to remember about this whole upfront research piece is government budgeting and procurement is unique and really follows a strict structure. Government contracts, while they can be very lucrative, you must really understand the critical aspects like, which agencies and programs have a budget. Because as Mike said, just about everybody will probably meet with you, but that doesn't mean they can buy. We work with companies all the time that have a pipeline full of opportunities, and every one of them attached to it is the agency says they need it, and the folks really like it, But if there's not a budget, there's not an official process that's going to be walked through, the chances of you closing that deal on the other end are slim to none. So take the time, do your research, and that's not only going to make the return on investment in these opportunities much greater for you, it's also going to dramatically increase the likelihood of you winning these opportunities. And maybe go to the next one, Abby. So, you've done this great market research. Now, how do you use the market research? And our key thing is you want to use the research to identify a set of ideal opportunities for your organization to pursue. So they're a good fit for your technology. They've got a budget. You understand the timeline and the process and contracting. So it's a valid opportunity to pursue it. Then what you want to do is you want to develop an effective sales plan for each of those opportunities. Keep in mind, selling into the government is really the ultimate enterprise sale. To successfully accomplish it, it really requires the coordination of resources, all working against a common sales plan. It's not a transactional type of market. There's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of different folks involved in this. So you've got to have a very detailed plan, which includes all of your partners, and make sure everybody's working towards the same thing. You can't wing it or go, hey, if we can just get a meeting with the CIO, I'm sure they'll buy. It's way more involved than that. So your sales plan needs to include items like, the opportunity details. Obviously, who's the decision maker? Who are the incumbents? What are the timelines to get things in? Understand, hey, if there's an incumbent, when does their contract expire? So you have a really good idea of when this new contract can potentially go into place, just as an example. The second thing I think is really important, if you're in the Carahsoft ecosystem, include Carahsoft into these plans that you're putting together. The organization has a wealth of information and resources you can leverage. So really work with your Carahsoft sales team as you're putting these plans together. At Marion Square, when we build sales plans for our clients, we do regular check-ins with the Carahsoft sales team to make sure we're leveraging all the assets that they have and can bring to market to help us. And then the last thing is, don't forget other potential partners, systems integrators, maybe other technology partners. This is critical for companies that are really new to the government space, because the two things you really lack are credibility and access. And a lot of times, if you work with a partner that has done work in that space or in that agency before, they can provide you with both of those things. So keep that in mind as you develop these sales plans, which again, in our mind, is the number 2 recommendation of what you want to do. Mike, anything you want to add there? Yeah,
I would add, Harvey, that again, this is based off experience and based off of Caitlin's piece. It's never been a better time to be an innovative company coming to market in public sector. Public sector is waking up to the fact that they need to innovate their tech infrastructure, their capabilities, and they are getting more attuned to what's coming to market. However, we've almost never seen a company fall backwards into a thriving public sector business, right? Without having some sort of proactive, dedicated outreach plan and sales plan that like Harvey's describing. So there is occasionally lots of the companies we deal with will have a win that had come from the government finding them, but more often than not, to build a strong practice here, a strong outreach plan sort of needs to be invested in. Absolutely.
Abby, if you hit the next one, please. So this is a critical one. You spend the time and you do your research, you identify all the right opportunities, you build the perfect sales plan. And then you go and talk to the government, and you talk to the government about how your technology enables retail to sell, 50% more than they sold last year. You may think that's totally insane, or why would somebody do that? But it has happened before. So make sure that you're customizing your message and you're customizing your collateral to match, the government sales market. Know the government use cases and the user scenarios for your technology, and be sure to highlight this in your message. Develop government-specific presentations and support content. At Marion Square, when we help our clients, sometimes we even go down to developing specific presentations and support content for certain agencies. So it's maybe have a government-wide message, but you could also have a specific message and collateral around a certain agency and how you're helping them become compliant with certain things. Include government speak and phrases as you describe, your services and your products, and then clearly be able to articulate where you fit in the government architecture or enable an agency to become compliant with regulations. So a big one out there right now is zero trust. There was the executive order. All the agencies have to be compliant by the end of FY24. So everybody is in the zero trust market these days. And in order to get somebody's attention in the government and to be relevant, you have to say, we fit in the data column, or we fit in the identity column, or we fit in the visibility column, and this is how we're going to make you compliant. So do the research and understand where you fit in those architectures. And again, just overall, make sure your collateral is customized and on point to meet the government market's requirements.
Yeah, and I'd just add that from the context of the last slide we discussed, good messaging, good collateral is going to help you scale that that proactive sales plan we talked about in the next case, in the last slide, where you could hire an army of salespeople going one-to-one and reaching out to customers with a really good crisp sales plan. But if you've got good messaging and good collateral and you're leveraging different outlets to market that messaging and collateral, they're going to be that much more effective with with scaled out efforts.
Absolutely. So the last recommendation we want to talk about is the importance of your partner strategy. We hit some of this in the sales plan, but it's really critical in government. I mean, I know in the commercial space, sometimes partners aren't that as important, but in the government, they're a critical piece to what you're doing. And we like to break them out into a couple different categories. One is your distributor partner, which is Carahsoft, and we'll talk a little bit more about, or they'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about contract vehicles and how to go to market with them and those sorts of things. And the second one is, we'll hit this in a little more detail here, are the systems integrators. They play a really important role in these government opportunities, especially if you're looking for a large enterprise deployment, because oftentimes they end up being the customer, not necessarily the government. The government will contract them to go out and put a solution together and then manage it and sustain it and operate it on a day-to-day basis. So you may not, as the software vendor, may not even be the prime. The government SI may end up being the prime, and you're just a piece of what they're doing. The other thing to keep in mind is this whole notion of the socioeconomic classifications. So for example, chances are if you're going to compete for a VA, a Veterans Administration opportunity, you're going to have to work with a service-disabled veteran-owned business. You're not going to be able to respond by yourself. So understanding that field and being able to tap and work with various partners that can help you in the space is going to help you get down the path a lot quicker and make you much more competitive when working for these or working towards these contracts. You may want to hit the next slide there, Abby, and I'll let Mike and them talk a little bit about the contracting strategies.
Sure. So sort of the other piece that Harvey touched on is having a good contract strategy and making sure as you're positioning with different agencies and different customers, you have some level of understanding of how these agencies purchase products and some route to transact with them when the time comes. If the time comes, again, good problem to have. There's a sort of fundamental core set of contract vehicles that we recommend getting on right away, and that's part of the onboarding strategy that Carahsoft deploys is getting our partners added to SOUP, NASPO, ITES, and a couple of other of these foundational vehicles that give you a fairly broad coverage. And then also aligning with the right teaming partners. So I always sort of relate it, or if you think about it visually, and sort of what we propose to our vendor partnerships is a layer of contract vehicles that is as broad and expansive to give you access, either broad or specific access to any given customer that you might be looking to transact with. and then a good network of reseller partners that check all the boxes on 8As or SDV or service disabled veteran owns, hub zones, et cetera, let alone folks that might hold valuable contract vehicles themselves. So if you layer those two networks on top of each other, it should give you, the at least the baseline coverage that you need to really get to virtually any customer in the market. And that's the approach sort of we take, partnering with tech companies that are coming to market and sort of take on that role and responsibility of managing those two networks of contract vehicles and resellers layered on top of each other. Not something to be overlooked, but again, one important piece of a good strategy.
Absolutely. So kind of just a final summation from a recommendations perspective, you keep these things in mind, I think it will serve you well, right? So don't just hop in and chase, shiny objects. Really take your time to put a market strategy, assess the market, put a plan together. I know some folks look at it and go, oh, we're not interested in a plan. We just want to execute. Taking the time up front to do the research and put this together will ensure that you get the most from your investment in government, and will definitely, I think, increase your chances of winning these opportunities. There's some really hard rules that the government buys by and plays by. And if you know those rules and know how to take advantage of those rules, it will definitely help you. And again, it kind of follows on to this last one. Meetings aren't your final objectives. Winning contracts are. Building a profitable, sustainable government business is the objective. And it all starts with, the research, putting the sales plan together, making sure you have the collateral that matches that and supports that, and then the contracting vehicles and the partners to help you get this done. So with that, I don't know, Mike, if there's anything you wanted to add there, but if not, we can hop into the Q&A.
Harvey, I just want to close with, from our end, thanking you for inviting us to participate in this webinar. We've got a good complementary working relationship with Marion Square that we value, and we're very excited when about the companies that you engage with. We feel like you can help lay a lot of that groundwork to hand off to the Carahsoft model to really get the most out of the market opportunity for emerging tech companies here in the public sector. So I'd encourage anyone out there to follow up with Harvey and hear more about Marion Square's offerings and how they could help complement what you might be seeing out of your Carahsoft team at this to date.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. We love working with Carahsoft companies as well. And like I say, I think it's a really good fit as we can help put the research and the market strategy and the messaging together, and then let the great Carahsoft execution engine go out and start to execute against that. So I think it's a really good match.
Okay, going into Q&A, we do have a couple questions that came through. One kind of geared towards FedRAMP. So if we're not currently FedRAMPed, how would this affect our go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, so from a FedRAMP perspective, we get that question quite a bit. And what we tell folks is it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. You can't get FedRAMP certified pretty much unless an agency is a sponsor for you. So, get yourself FedRAMP ready, right? Understand what's involved in being FedRAMP certified and make sure you're good with that. And then pursue business. And if an agency hires you or contracts with you, you need to let them know, hey, we're going to need you to be our FedRAMP sponsor so we can get this done. It's not something agencies aren't accustomed to being asked, because there's only like 200 FedRAMP certified software products right now, and the government uses a whole lot more than that. So I wouldn't think it's a bad thing that you're not FedRAMPed. I wouldn't let it prevent me from going to market. Just understand what's involved with it. And be ready that when an agency says, hey, we want to work with you, say, great, we need to get FedRAMP certified. Will you be our sponsor? Here's where we're at in the process and what we need to do. And
Harvey, can I add that Carahsoft has a good amount of subject matter expertise that can help guide and counsel you towards the most efficient and economical way to achieve whatever the end state of FedRAMP or one of the IL levels that you might be pursuing for DoD work. So get with your Carousel team. We got a lot of resources, and while we don't perform any of the third-party services, there is a big network that's developed over the last couple of years of sort of a sub-industry of third-party companies that are helping technology companies get to the various stages of FedRAMP or through the IL process efficiently and effectively and economically. So we'd be happy to help counsel anyone towards a strategy and then make some intros towards some of the folks to based off the requirements.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. You guys do a really good job of helping that out.
Thank you, Harvey and Mike. We do have another question coming in. Mike, this one's geared more towards you. You mentioned assisting companies getting onto additional contracts such as SOUP. How would we go about getting that ball rolling?
Just you could reach out to me or Caitlin, and we'll get you to the right folks. I do a lot of the I have a big hand in onboarding new vendor partnerships, as do others in the company. So I'd be a good place to start, and happy to get connected with whoever that question it came from. And again, SOUP is a foundational vehicle, not that challenging to get companies added to once we have an agreement in place to do business. So we'd be happy to walk anyone through what that looks like.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Another question came through. Harvey, I don't know, this might be a little more geared towards you. Could you go into a little more detail on the SDVOSB you mentioned? Is it required to work with the VA that you have to work with an SDVOSB? And maybe you could go into more detail on some of those teaming and partnering arrangements.
Yeah, so it's not required across the board to have an SDVOSB partner for VA, but a lot of the opportunities that we see come out of VA do require it. So I think having an SDVOSB as a partner that you can go to if you're going to go after that market is probably something that will serve you well over time. Again, we like to take a look at each individual agency and opportunity from a partnering perspective to see who's going to bring the most value and help make your team the most competitive with that. So some instances it may be an 8A, some instances it may be an SDVOSB, some instances it may not be either one of those. It's just, hey, do we have a great tech and can we, provide a very competitive response? So again, a lot of it just depends on the opportunity and the agency that you're working for. But you need to be open to a partnering relationship, I guess would be the bottom line with that.
Right. And so Harvey, to that point, every agency has I don't want to call them quotas, but percentages of contracts that they need to issue to SDVOs, to 8As, to hub zones, to all of the socioeconomic categories. They sort of fluctuate agency by agency, and as you could probably guess, the Veterans Affairs is pretty invested in supporting small disadvantaged veteran-owned businesses. So their category of spend through SDVOs is probably the highest of any agency out there. I'd rely on Caitlin to back up that data. But every agency is going to. So it's all about having the flexibility. We've all run into deals at the 11th hour, end of September, that the only way that a customer can get a purchase order issued by midnight on September 30th is through a hub zone or an 8A. So being able to turn on a dime and have a good network of partners that you can call on and have bid on opportunities or transact opportunities. And again, the strategy through Caresoft that we help our partners manage is, at a moment's notice, we could have five hub zones lined up, ready, who are good folks, ready to help us with any given transaction, and are reasonably sort of consistent in their performance and their service. So so it's not just aligning with one category. You got to be aligned on all the socioeconomic categories.
Yep, that's great.
Awesome. Thank you, Harvey and Mike. It looks like that wraps up our questions for the webinar. So be on the lookout, everyone, for an email at the next day or so with the recording, our slide deck, additional resources, as well as our contact information. We hope today's session was very helpful for you. And again, thanks for joining.
Thank you.